All right, we have a quorum. It's 12 o'clock, so Mary, is it okay to go ahead and call the meeting to order? You all set over there? All right, calling to order at noon. If we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Egan?
Here.
Ms. Lasky? Here. Mr. Jeff Dance?
Here.
Mr. Becker? Ms. Goodman? Mr. Adam Dance? Ms. Kaminsky? Here.
Thank you. And we all got an agenda sent to us. I have nothing to add to that. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? We do have some people from the public here. If you have anything you'd like to say, we actually have some time now, for that. If you just want to observe, that's fine too. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Just observing is fine.
That's fine. That's fine.
First time, so.
Sure.
Just want to have the
Good to have you here.
experience.
And we have no one online, public comment?
No.
All right, we've got the minutes from, let's start with the regular meeting minutes first, from the 18th. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? And then to the special meeting minutes from the 8th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. That takes us to the treasurer's report.
So you'll see the accounts payable list, which is pretty normal, nothing out of normal. Just need you guys to approve that unless anybody has any questions on it.
Was legal for the, like, to review the, that's not a recurring?
No.
Right, what was that for? They review some stuff for the bids?
That was, they reviewed the meat and hunt contract that we approved last month.
All right. Anyone else? Do I have a motion to accept the accounts payable?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's a roll call vote for that.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky? Yes. Mr. Jeff Dance?
Yes.
Mr. Becker? Ms. Goodman? Mr. Dance? Adam Dance? Ms. Kaminsky?
Adam
Yes.
Dance. Is that a yes?
It's my turn.
Okay, and then we have the, revenue and expenditure reports and the trial balance. And
What about the capital improvement?
there was
fund?
nothing in the capital improvement
Okay, thanks.
fund that got, yeah.
Okay.
This last month. So, sorry I wasn't here last month, so.
No,
No, I'm not sorry at all. The only thing I'd like to point out is the Honest Air. I did not have that in time for the last month, so it got booked February, March together. So that's the $42,000. So last month we were probably in a little bit of a negative there. For where you're at halfway through the year, you have a almost $23,000 positive. So that's good, because when you look at it, last year, we were pretty much even last year, so. Did anybody have any questions on any of this?
Not for the revenue, for expense.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our contracted services, the, maintenance and airport, were less quarter to date.
So last fiscal year, that $27,000 was making up 6 months of the additional contract that did not start in October.
Okay.
So, yeah, you'd kind of have to look at where you're at.
Costing last year over
Yeah, you're fine.
Also this year, we've had less snow plowing hours, so
Yeah,
that
okay.
is one of the variable winter costs that
Oh,
come into play.
But yeah, so when
Yeah,
you look
okay.
at those two for the orchard and then for the other, it's 6 months of the additional catch-up, basically, there. Any other questions?
Anything else?
And then we did finish the audit out, positive, so that was good.
Good.
And actually, there are copies of the audit for everybody.
Let's see. I already have one.
Get one,
Anything else? Motion to accept?
So moved.
Oh, second?
Second.
All right, and ready for a roll call.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky? Mr. Justin?
Yes.
Mr. Becker? Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Adam Don?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Can we talk about the little audit for a minute? So if you turn to page 5, that kind of really is gonna go over, a lot of, it talks about what your fund balance is, what percent you're at. The county has a fund balance policy of having at least 15%, so, the airport is at that 15.8%, but that's just something to keep in mind, because I think we pretty much follow all the policies that the county has. So we'll just need to keep an eye on that. And then the only other thing that the auditor did, talk to me about, which we haven't done in the last couple of years, when you look at your trial balance, you see that negative cash up here of the negative $67,000 that was on here. That's
Mhm.
actually money that the airport owes to the county, and they would like to book that as a due to and due from now on at the end of the fiscal year. So, then that cash would be zero, and then in the liabilities, you'll start to see a due to the county, and so that's what that is. And pretty much that's kind of like the PFAS grant, 'cause we pay that, and then we don't get it till later. I'm not too concerned with it, so we'll have to take a look at it at the end of the fiscal year and then kind of like figure out why that's negative and if that's gonna
So that could
clear
be
up.
more of a revolving, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they just don't like to see that negative cash on the books, and this year was a little higher than previous years where they haven't really said anything, but, you know, when you have reimbursing grants and the county covers those, you know, and then you don't get it until October or November, well, it washes itself out, but they just don't wanna see that on the books, so they wanna book it as a due to the county.
Okay.
And then that'll just I'll reverse it as of October 1st of every fiscal year, so really the only time you'll see that is maybe in your October report before I reverse that out, and then the next, you'll see where that cash has gone different again, and then, so other than that, everything else was really good with the audit.
So that's a function of the grant cycle being different
Yeah,
than
pretty
the-
much, yeah.
than the fiscal year?
Yeah. So a lot of times, like, maybe we had those expenses in July and August, so it's a reimbursing grant. So then we have to ask for the money, and then it might take 30 to 60, 90 days to get it back.
And the $67,000 is approved.
Yeah, that's pretty much what the PFAS grant is. So like, I could run a report now and, you know, the cash might only be negative 10 or 8, and that's, you know, due to accounts payable and money coming in.
I think what I was trying to get a handle on is what money do we owe the county that is not, going to be able to be repaid through grant?
Probably nothing,
Well, then,
because you have a positive fund balance.
Think of the county as the bank.
that's fine. I was just trying to understand if we have a deficit
No.
or not.
Your deficit would be if you didn't have a fund balance, and you have a fund balance of $91,000.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then, other thing is, if you would like the auditors to zoom in on a meeting and talk about the audit, or if you guys wanna read through it and see if you have any questions, but they're more than willing to,
I make a request, please, that unless we want to talk about this at a future meeting, that presentation material that we're gonna deliberate and try to ask questions about is not handed to us at the meeting, and I understand.
Well, we just got this, Anna,
When?
like, literally this week, this or last week,
Well, okay,
The intention was to give it to you today.
right? Just to the
for
review,
talk about-
discussion at a future meeting.
right?
Oh,
Yep.
okay, well,
But I just wanted to point out, you know, page
We don't have to
five.
take any action on
No,
this
no.
today.
So,
Typically, we would schedule, and this was what Susan was just describing, the auditor would come in and do a presentation on our audit for us.
Yeah.
At that time would be the discussion of it.
well, that's fine, and I'm respectful of that, but I would still make a request that we not be asked to deliberate material that's given to us after the meeting. I think it would be great if material could be supplied to us a week in advance. I understand we publish our agenda, in our meeting packet, generally on Friday before a Monday meeting. That complies with the Open Meetings Act and all required notice provisions. But the more advance notice and other boards get on, generally get their packets prior, with more notice. If the rest of the board members don't feel that way, that's fine. We don't have to change our practice, but I think many of us are under time constraints with other boards we serve on, and a few extra days would be real helpful.
I do agree with Adam, just, I mean, I end up having to skim through them, 'cause like, I know if I would just take the weekend, typically, my weekend is my weekend, and I do other work stuff. But, so I skim them, you know, real fast in the morning.
so would you rather have had this
Day
after
or
the
two.
meeting today to discuss for the next? This wasn't presented to you to discuss today.
No, that's.
This
I'm going
was
up
just
30,000 feet, even beyond the audit.
Yeah,
My
okay.
comment
Their
is more
agenda.
General.
Like mostly like the agenda, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And a
You
lot of
have
that is because I'm waiting for month end. So, like, when we have an early meeting, I'm not done with accounts payable. I mean, we don't do payroll here, but it's also like for when I do Ways and Means. Sometimes I don't have that done to the day before because I have to wait until I can close out accounts payable and payroll before I can do the finance reports. So sometimes she's waiting for me to do that. So, I mean, we could send out the agenda and everything else and then send out the financials a few days later. I mean, if that's,
That would be one approach that would be just fine, because generally, I think, financials are pretty vanilla.
Right, they are.
They're pretty straightforward.
Mhm,
It's
yeah.
not the bulk of strategic planning or
Right.
anything else.
Mhm.
It's the same fuel bill, the same bill to Orchard
Right.
Beach Aviation,
right,
and to hold up the balance of the packet where we really have to contemplate.
so you would like to have the packet, like, let's say, a week before the meeting?
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Like the Monday before.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, if possible. And if there's supplementary information that
Right,
comes the balance of
later.
the week,
Mhm.
that's okay too.
Yep. We can work on that. Sometimes it's just, you know, getting everything together.
And I know I'm new, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or reverse the magnetic poles.
There's a lot that goes into it, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Anything else? Okay, that wasn't an action,
Nope.
item, so we don't need a motion on that.
We can discuss it next month after you guys go through it, and then, if you have any questions and you want the auditors to Zoom, which I always recommend that, like, just to have them
We've done.
pop in and, yeah, go over it with you guys.
Should we plan
Maybe
on
like,
it anyway? Like-
yeah, like, maybe like in June,
Mhm.
like, I don't know when the June meeting is, but I would reach, you know, out, or Eric, you could reach out to the auditors and just say, hey, our June Monday, our June meeting is this day, would you guys be able to just Zoom in?
Yeah.
'Cause they're just gonna Zoom in for the county too, they're not gonna come in person.
Okay.
All right.
All right, that brings us to the committees, and the committees did not meet, obviously, but we have a lot of things coming up, and the committees do need to meet over the next month. So, with that said, it'd be nice if we could go ahead and schedule some of those meetings right now. The only person out right now, I think, is George, isn't it?
Yep.
So, we have an executive committee, bylaws committee, transition, capital improvements, and the budget committee needs to meet pretty soon. I'm not sure that that's,
When would you like started?
So we, have just started that at the county. I just opened it up for everybody. So, I can send a worksheet out where we're at for 6 months for you, an Excel worksheet. Yeah.
Meeting in May, that's.
Oh, yeah,
appropriate.
yeah. So what they're gonna try and do this year, they'd like to get it, the final approved in August, at that August meeting. And I can get you that date of when that is, so that way you've got some wiggle room. And then I'll give you those dates where you can come and talk to the county. So, you know, if you're wanting to get more from the county, you can go and present, and we don't have those dates, I don't think totally set yet, but I will, get you those once we get those narrowed down.
okay.
But, yeah.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that until after the
No.
next meeting?
Yeah, I would say sometime, like, if you wanna meet in June,
Okay, all right.
that would be good, 'cause then that would give you June and July, so you could kinda go over things in June, finalize those numbers in July, go meet with, the board,
I believe the calendar's been set.
has been set, okay.
Yeah.
I can print that off for you.
Okay.
But, no, I'm thinking that's too late.
Is it too late?
Well, 'cause.
Well, I'm thinking,
just from our process,
Well, if you meet in
We've gotta-
May,
we've
then you
gotta
can go to
meet-
the board in May.
Yeah.
I mean, before your board meeting in May.
we've got a committee meeting that needs to meet.
Right,
Then a draft budget needs to
Right.
come out of
Right.
that.
Right.
Go to this board,
Mhm.
and there should be at least a month for
Yep, May and June.
this board. So I think those meetings become May meetings and June meetings, so that we've got an adopted budget.
Sure.
Nice in June, could be
Mhm.
July,
Mhm.
so.
I just wanna make sure we're staying ahead of the process this cycle.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
so let's cycle back then. Are we talking about then after the May meeting, whatever date that is?
Well, I would meet before the May board
I think the
meeting.
committee should meet
Meet
before.
before that,
Before.
okay.
Then you've got something to present to the May meeting.
Okay.
And with respect to the county board, we may want to prepare ourselves for having to make a second request, or if the county, if we go, have our committee meeting,
Mhm.
approve our budget, make our ask, I would not want to leave ourselves in a position where we don't have an opportunity to go back to the county board before they're forced
All right.
to approve their budget.
That's why if we could have something done in June, that
Mhm.
should work well with the county schedule over the summer.
Great.
All right, so let's go ahead and start with that one then. Who is on the budget committee?
Great question.
Now, I
That,
should have that, and I can
is
dig it out, but it'll take a
Mike,
while.
Cindy, and Adam.
Thought I was on there, but I wasn't sure.
Congratulations. All right, so let's go ahead and start with that then. Calendar up a second ago. All right. Get your calendars and see if we can start finding some dates.
Yeah, I don't gotta do that one.
I know, I put my pen down.
I ain't gotta worry about them days.
All right.
Thank you all for letting us observe.
Oh.
Get back to work.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Talk with you guys
Okay,
later.
later.
All right. So, this week, I'm free in the afternoons pretty much all week this week. And this is the budget committee we're talking about. So Cindy and Adam, what days look okay for you?
You gotta tell them what week you're talking about.
This week,
The 16th,
none.
okay? That's fine. Oh, that's cool, that's cool. All right, so next week, all I'm available is 22 and 23.
How's if we met on Monday the 29th, does that put us behind the eight ball?
No, that's perfectly, that's still way before the next meeting.
Okay.
The 29th works for me. How about you, Cindy?
Works for me.
Okay, so let's do that then. 29, is noon okay with you guys?
Oh, you're talking about May.
April.
No, I'm April
Okay,
20th,
that's,
yeah.
I thought you said May, and I'm like, wait a
I'm
minute.
sorry,
I'm confused now.
I was, because I had May written right underneath that, so.
29th at noon, you said?
Mhm. Yeah, it's just easy for me to remember.
Great.
All right, so there's the budget committee. All right, we also have a capital improvements committee, that's, Karen, you, me, and George. And George isn't here right now, so, do you wanna see if we can come up with with a couple of starting dates, and then I can bounce those off George?
Before our next meeting?
Yes.
I've got some folks.
Yeah, and we're ready to go anytime. I mean, I'm not saying we'll have a meeting right now,
Right, yeah.
but we could meet technically, right, okay. I'm free this week again.
We come back on book,
Okay, that's fine.
but you're gonna be here on the 29th?
Yes.
What about 1 o'clock on the 20th? Or is that just an hour for your?
That'd only be an hour for the budget meeting,
Which
and we might,
should be fine.
you think
for-
so, for that first one?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it. I wonder if the budget meeting should go last. Because I wonder if the budget isn't a function of what the capital improvements people are gonna say.
Not completely,
of
because,
the requests coming up from, what do we need for salary from transition?
yeah, that's something else. This is basically going back to the grant that we're still working off of. Well, it's erased now, but, this is off of money that's already sitting there, and we're just finishing that up. So this is really just kind of cleaning up a longer project for that. Yeah. I want to keep the budget committee, though, where it is. Yeah, I want to keep that right there. And, so we're staying ahead of the game with that.
So right after that, 1:30, I'm open that afternoon.
Okay,
So what do you want, 1 or 1:30?
let's go 1:30 if we can. April 29, 30. App improvements.
I'm on that too, right?
Nope,
No?
that's just me, Karen, and George.
Oh, okay.
We can assign you, yeah.
No, I'm good.
You can have my spot.
No, you can.
Okay, and now, the bylaws committee. That's me, Alyssa, and Karen. Alyssa, what looks good to you? And I'm gonna be asking you again in a few minutes, so be looking at a couple of different.
What works? What works for you guys?
The only thing I have just completely off of the table right now, all day, is the 24th, 25, and 26th of April. Everything else I can shuffle around and make work.
Since Karen, and you're already here on the 29th, continuing that afternoon, it makes sense.
Making a marathon for
Yeah,
Mike.
we'd be sitting here all day, is that okay?
I'm okay with that.
right.
Hanging around the
Are you
airport?
available in the afternoon on the 29th?
Yeah.
Like 2:30 then?
2:30, okay.
I have a meeting that usually, or is scheduled to end at 2:45, but
You wanna go a little,
it often goes short.
you wanna go a little later? You wanna schedule this a little later?
No, I don't want you guys sitting here if you're already.
Oh, I'm fine. I mean,
We'll plan 2:30, and if you guys aren't ready from your previous meeting, I've got something to do for 15 minutes. How about that?
Okay.
2:30?
Yeah.
2:30. All right, and then the bylaws, that's, I'm sorry, that was the bylaws, the executive committee, yeah.
Executive.
Do you mean executive, or do you mean the transition committee?
The executive.
I'm not sure they need, if there's anything that they need to meet.
Okay, all right. So that takes us into the transition committee, and that's me and the Dunces. So, so Dunces, when would y'all like to, come hang out with Mike?
How about 11 a.m. on the 29th?
I'm not here on the 20th.
Right.
Oh, man, it was gonna be a
Try.
clean sweep.
Yeah, all on the same day. Nobody'd have to remember another date.
Oh, my gosh.
We're in Lansing on the 29th, 30th, and the 1st.
Okay. I'm okay.
How about the Friday, May 3rd, does that work?
May 3rd is a sweet deal for me,
Mm-hmm,
You in the neighborhood?
mm-hmm.
okay?
Time?
How about noon? Is that all right, or y'all wanna go, and I'm pulling noon just out of thin air,
Does not matter to me. I'm wide open at the moment.
okay?
Probably have a personnel committee, but that'd be 9 a.m.
3rd.
I'm looking at one thing here. Try it.
These committee meetings are subject to open meeting act, right? Like, they have to be in person and all that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be by Zoom.
Great.
To vote on any, well, to vote on anything.
Do they have to be, or like if you're just I don't think you have to be. I think you could do by Zoom.
Don't,
Yeah, I was just curious,
because
I don't
we
think
don't
so.
have a quorum present, so
No.
no decisions
Mhm.
can be
Yeah,
made, it's just
just
recommendations to the
reviewing,
board.
okay.
We tend to allow, I mean, we don't exclude people, but we don't publish them as open meetings.
Yeah, on the 30th,
Yeah.
definitely.
Mike, is 1 o'clock okay with you?
One's fine with me, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
1 o'clock. All right, would anybody else like to commit me to another committee meeting?
Yeah, I got lots I can commit you
I'm gonna move my
to.
chair.
Okay.
Yeah, have to be airport related?
Yeah, I could make it.
Yeah, I see exactly where this is going.
You should be texting your wife.
No.
Hey, Mike just asked what else he can be committed to.
Yeah, like she needs some more, like she needs anything else on that list, or I need it. Okay, good deal. Thanks a lot, everybody. Barry, I'm gonna bail out before they make me do something else.
Okay, my report's gonna be very quick. Not a lot has changed, you can pass those around. So it's just a couple updates from the standard no incidents or accidents in the month. Looking at the airfares, the enplanement numbers. So March, we had a total of 714 passengers, which is a record for this airport for March. So we surpassed the record from the previous year. March is basically the month that Frontier did not operate when they were here, so it is the one month that there are easier comparisons versus the other 11. But Cape Air has done well, and again, that's a record for the month. Performance was good, 2% canceled, which basically equates to 2 flights. And that was basically a mechanical issue, and minor delays. So overall, good numbers there. On the airfares, just looking at that, the biggest change isn't really for us, it's really for Traverse City. Fares there increased almost $200 on average a month from my last report, whereas the other 3 airports were on the order of $50. So I don't know if that was just, happened to be the dates that were picked where their flights happened to be more full than normal, or if that is a reflection of a ramp up in fares for the summer, which is typical for the Traverse City market, is fares go up there in the summer, demand spikes and go down in the off-season. So something I think that's a little bit to keep an eye on there. But we're competitive with our neighboring airports. Actually, this month, as compared to Traverse City, in good shape. And obviously, add in parking, that just moves the needle even more so in our favor. Then, on capital projects, I have not heard anything back from state and or FAA on our ALP update that is in their courts. Looking at local projects, so our big project for the year is this safety area grading, runway lighting, beacon. Mead and Hunt held their 60% plan review meeting with both MDOT, myself, and the FAA, and no real issues were uncovered, although between the 30% plan and the 60% plan, the estimated cost of the project did rise about 10%. One of the more expensive things, well, in each of these categories, so I'll talk about the safety grading area. In the southwest corner, they're actually going to need to be installing a retaining wall because of where the bluff comes down in relationship to the area that needs to be graded. They basically need to be holding soil in a way that will allow that, and also still allow access to the road drive that's down there. So that's adding a little bit of cost to make that happen. And then on the runway lighting, it's just the cost of materials is driving things up. The estimate at this point is the engineering phase, the anticipated cost for materials that is driving it up. Partly because current standards and best practices for a lot of reasons are to install conduit for all of the cable that's laid out there, whereas currently what is out there is direct burial. With our soils, it's not that big of an issue, but they were hoping that they could reuse the existing conduit, but there is no existing conduit, so it's an installation of a couple miles worth of conduit that's driving up. And no interaction with Mead and Hunt on either of the other two sub-projects there in the last month. But then on my next page, I have had a couple conversations in one kind of meeting with Mead and Hunt, talking about airport terminal improvements. And we're trying to get a meeting scheduled this week with TSA to really kind of lock in what their needs are. The one thing I'm aware of is TSA has for years been wanting to install a full body scanner here. That's kind of the standard equipment at every checkpoint. We don't have the space for it, and so that's trying to talk about that. I'll give the board a little heads up here because this ties into last week's decision. There is funding available right now for airport terminal improvement projects, $5 billion actually. 20% of that is reserved for small airports like us. So it's not all going to the needs of large hub airports, carve out for smaller airports. That's a 5-year program, and we're currently in the second year of that. So this is prep work to basically get us into the queue to then justify a project to get funding, hopefully in year 4 or 5 of that program. it's competitive, so therefore we need to have as strong of a case as possible. And the kind of gotcha that I'm hearing from, Mead and Hunt and the state is we're gonna need terminal study to basically be the justification for our needs, and, you know, this TSA stuff is part of that. And like a lot of things, we have to foot the bill for the study. And if the project moves forward, that's reimbursable under grants to do it. If we don't get the money, then we're out, whatever that study ends up costing us. So at some point in this process, we're going to need to make a decision. Does it make sense to move forward? Do we think our chances are good enough that we don't want to risk potentially on the order of $100,000 of our money that we may never see again if we don't succeed in following through on that project? I was very confident when I was thinking that we would have 30-seat regional jet service, because that makes us bust at the seams and, you know, would be the justification. We'll see if, going through this process, the needs of TSA are enough to get us to that point. Sure. I mentioned this a little bit in Monday's meeting, but, I haven't walked the board through all of this yet, because it was all futures, but we're starting this process right now.
I think the TSA thing is probably a pretty good, you know, foothold. Plus, we expect that we will have more traffic through the place. That is the expectation with our new carrier.
Right.
Not here, but we're gonna be here.
Correct.
And so we will
Right.
have higher foot traffic that's gonna have to be shuttled through the
But
place.
the issues are more around just physical constraints around, you know, 9 passengers or more. So it's just, the holding area that we have was designed to accommodate 19 people, because that's the level of service we had at that time. You can't fit 30 people in there.
But that was also pre-TSA days.
Yeah.
No, it was not. Terminal was,
Built after TSA?
TSA came in,
12?
no, TSA came in just a couple years after 9/11.
9/11.
So this was built in '07, so this was
Yeah,
built
back
in
20 years.
anticipation of that. So again, that's just a FYI, no action, but I just wanted to share of some of that.
Well, as all our committees are engaged in meeting, you know, I thought the process, in the deliberation last week on the air carriers was, so informative on so many levels. From your technical knowledge, Barry, of, FAA requirements, to learning about concerns of board members and planning and things related to not only the airport, but in the community in a broader sense, and handling increased demand. And that really kind of is at the heart of my question about budget committee. And the budget is really just merely a reflection of the priorities of the board. And this $100,000 study is one example of that. Should we budget for it or not? Other examples of that are a longer runway, increasing capacity of the holding room for 30-passenger jets. We heard about parking constraints in the lot, rental car companies, the list is on and on. And to me, the budget is only good as the direction set by the board of where the airport is going and when it's going there. And so the question of this is, in which committee deliberates the concerns of, is the parking lot big enough or not? Do we need a rental car company or not? Do we need to expand the terminal, or is it appropriately sized for 9-passenger jets And how do we address the concern of the board members that said there isn't enough capacity in the airport to handle a jet? When do we revisit all of those very valid concerns that were shared so that they aren't brought to light 2 years from now when we're looking at an EAS contract and say, oh, well, we can't do that today because we don't have it. So, how do we start? What are the appropriate committees in the appropriate forum to immediately begin working on and addressing all the concerns that were shared at last Monday's meeting, so that they can be put in the budget, so that we can go to the county and say, here's the vision, here's the money we need from the county to do that, here's the money, the matching grant that we're gonna apply to the federal government, et cetera.
It has been, when I first got on this committee, or the authority, we had a strategic planning out there. I don't think we've much, I mean, we don't go over that, we don't update that, we don't review it. You know, honestly, I probably forgot half of it. You know, so I think that exactly what Adam's saying is that, are we all on the same page? I mean, in my head, I'm thinking boutique, maybe a couple of years, and then maybe moves us to that next level. But that's probably something I had an opportunity to share with Adam, but I didn't share, you know, like my vision of where we're going. Maybe if we had a strategic planning or some sort of meeting to set ourselves up so that we are addressing what he's saying, you know, it's like, I think we all want to move to this higher level. We just gotta be pretty specific in how we move in that. Plus, I know that, you know, you're saying, you might want a life of your own for a while here down the road here, you know, so I don't think it's ever too early to start, you know, I mean, that's a big step for us. So, you know, we should be looking at all this stuff and are we all on the same page? Right?
Sure. Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty easy thing to do, to put together at least a exploratory committee. Thing is, we have to keep those committees to 3 people. We can't have more than 4 people on a committee. And so we're limited in the debate time during the committee times, because we can't create a quorum in a committee. But that's certainly an easy enough thing. This is kind of a, off the top of my head, statement. That
I
you could
guess
put something like that together.
I'll tie in a couple things there. So as Karen, you know, said, the airport went through a strategic planning process, and that was done as a full board.
Right.
But that was done probably in 15, so that's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
God, I've been wrong.
It was it was updated a couple years, it had one update a couple years later.
Yeah.
That may be, but it has not, the board has not really looked at that document since that time. It touches on a lot of the things that were talked about last week, but being at least 5 years old, those aren't necessarily the most current thoughts.
Right.
So,
We've got a long-term plan, do we not? We see annually?
we have a capital plan with the FAA.
Yeah, that we set out, here's our points that we'd like to hit, and then we cascade to whatever to the top, hopefully we get funding for.
Correct.
Except these are, strategic plan is something that you should review often. It is a live document, so that it evolves with where you're at. You're also talking, it's kind of equates in the business world to a business model, you know, a business plan. What is your plan? Where are you gonna go with all that? So, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. They just don't stay static for years and years and years. You have to evaluate and kind of move them around.
Well, and to your point, Jeff, the stuff on our FAA capital, our airport capital improvement plan, the FAA term for it, are projects that are known to be needed and basically in queue for funding. things like a runway extension is not on that list, because that's more gray. Things like our car rental needs,
No.
FAA doesn't do anything with that.
But we did have the terminal on there, I thought.
The terminal is because the opportunity of funding came up, and that's why they got it on there.
Yep.
So, you know, things are fluid, but in an environment where things are fluid, if you're not periodically reviewing things, you're not adjusting.
Well, and to me, I would like to take all of the concerns that were expressed at last Monday's meeting and get them written down. And then we can figure out, is it attributable to FAA grants? Is it attributable to earmarks? Is it attributable to the county? What is the appropriate funding silo? But, you know, there's a concern about rental cars. Well, you know, we're gonna shuttle the same amount of people through here with no rental cars with Boutique as we would have with the other carrier. It's just they're going by way of 9 passengers or 30 passengers. So the rental car issue is an issue. The parking lot issue is an issue. Those are parking capacity. Those are all issues that are here today, right now, regardless of whether you have Contour or Boutique. We've spent money to acquire more land for a longer runway. Where's the plan on that and the justification? And you brought up, I thought very insightfully, Barry, you have jet service, that leads into your justification for longer runway. And so I think we need these things documented so that right now we are beginning to address them, because they all take time, all take lobbying of our county officials, our state officials, our federal officials. My experience, it's a coin toss whether you get what you're asking for the first time. So you need persistence and keep going to the well. And 2 years from now, we'll be here in a blink of an eye.
Part of what I saw too, and I kept pushing, it's not just the car, it's the economic development piece. I'm fine with, you know, the skiers and the golfers and stuff, but I just would love to draw more into city, county, you know, just, our economic development person, you know, more invested here. Our tourism more invested here. The chamber more invested here. You know, I just want to see, really pull them in tight so that we have more people coming into our community, but not just going to one place, coming into the community and finding other things to do. So I'm looking for a bigger growth across the board.
So, I wish I had been here for the last meeting, the last couple meetings actually. So, I mean, I read all the proposals, and this probably isn't the time to be asking all this, but since I wasn't here, it's probably, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I'm just trying to figure out, you know, I agree with what you're saying, and moving forward and expanding is one of the goals that we have here. My question is, why do we pick the airline we did when, if Contour had more capacity, that would give us the opportunity to get the grant to do a full-size scanner for TSA, to expand our lobbying.
I think that's actually a hard question to answer. What I would really recommend is the videos online. Watch the last hour, which is the deliberation process.
Okay.
Because, I mean, there was, the short summary is there was a vote. There was a motion to approve Contour, and that failed 3-2. Another half-hour discussion, and then a motion for Boutique. So it was a very split environment. There were pros and cons of each, and they were talked about throughout. So it's not easy to just say this is the reason, because it was a lot of little factors.
Okay.
But it is online, and I went through it on Friday as I was doing the minutes for that meeting, and really enlightening hearing again everyone's thoughts and comments on that.
Okay.
And, you know, I want a jet service here. I just don't want it in Orchard Happiness. I want us to be able to afford it, be ready for it, to, you know, enhance it. I'm using, or in my opinion, I was using boutique as a stepping stone to getting there.
Which is why these next 2 years, like everything Adam's saying, like, let's get prepared, let's have our
Yep.
stuff
I'd
in
like to
order.
I'd like to ask the chair
Yep.
and Barry if we can form a committee for that purpose, to address all of those very legitimate and very meaningful points and begin working on it now, so that we're ahead of the curve when the contract is
Like I said, that's easy enough to do.
Okay, so should we do that right now? Or when, do we wanna wait a month to do it?
Let's wait a month to do that. We got enough on the
George will
plate
be here.
right now. I'd like to have George in that. And, he has a lot of insight into the, inner workings of an airline operation, maintenance and all. So if we could wait till George is here, that'd be great.
All right, I'm hearing him say a few things like this talking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Things I never thought of.
Yeah. Well,
But I think how you started opening that question was, well, are there things that we need to be considered in these, April 29th meetings, or what, like, in the different committee meetings, even now? Like, is waiting a month from now to get some of that on paper gonna be,
Well, you know, to me, the budget reflects, Barry's put a request out, hey, there's a study, there's a business decision that needs to be made, do we wanna risk $100,000 to, explore the terminal? Well, that's a budget decision, and we're gonna take that up in 2 weeks.
Well, except, part of it is just timing of these things. These decisions happen all the time, so budget cycle is on a cycle. So for that particular project, we won't be in a position to be making that decision probably for 6 months yet. By the time Mead and Hunt gets the information they're gathering right now, and gets it back to us, it won't really, it most likely will not fit within this budget cycle.
But
Well, I
what
think that's my
you're
point.
saying, yeah, it's like, okay, our committee,
You gotta
You know
tee
what?
things up
we
here,
want
Mark,
this
you
at
get
the
it.
top.
Then we
We're
burn
gonna
a
need
year.
this, yeah.
See, what happens is, if we don't decide that, like, in the next 60 days,
But you
of
won't-
whether
but
we're gonna
you-
budget for it, we've burned a year.
But you won't have the information to make that decision in the next.
And
Well,
so when does that grant, like, is it for 24, 25, or is it 25, 26?
It's 25, 26, or 26, 27.
Right, so like, it wouldn't even be an issue for this budget to add the $100,000, because we're not gonna even do the study in 24, 25.
I don't know if that's,
It's gonna be
True or
26,
not.
27, right?
I mean, I don't know if that's true. I budget, and everybody's committees work different. I budget for things all the time that I don't spend, but it's a lot harder for me to engage in expenses that I want to incur if I don't have a budget. So if this group said, we want to have a year prior to our renewal to explore expanding that terminal, I would want to budget for it now.
Well, and so here's my reaction to that is, having lived in this role for 15 years now, I believe that there's, and I may hear otherwise, but I believe that there's 0% chance we will move forward with this if there's any chance that we have to fund it ourselves. That historically, the county has not stepped up and said, yeah, we'll write you a $100,000 check for a study that may or may not get reimbursed. We are challenged each year to get $10,000 or $15,000 extra to make our budget balanced. So, to me, that's why I need a lot of information, so I can go to the board and saying, this is a 98% likelihood that it's going to succeed, and we're not going to incur a cost, because if there's a chance that we're gonna incur the cost, I'm not even gonna bring that to the board, because that's what's been drilled into me, is we're not gonna spend the money's not there.
Therein lies
So-
our problem.
Well, but I'm just
Not the
saying,
result of you, but that's why we are where we are. It's because, in my opinion, our investment has been limited. Okay? And so, we will stay where we are if the status quo of limited funding from the county perpetuates. So, in my opinion, I think what we have to do is have a plan that addresses the concerns that were expressed at our meeting last Monday, that looks at all those issues, and then we put it on the table for the county board to consider, to what extent do they want to fund that, in whole, in part, or not at all. But I think we've got to go to them and say, if you want to grow Manistee and grow economic development and grow this airport, county, you need to fund X number of dollars, and here's a credible plan that will demonstrate that this board is a good steward of that investment.
And I'll add, and I agree with what you're saying, and I'm just throwing this out there because it's part of that discussion, and it's not something I've even mentioned in this forum for many, many years. But because we are an authority, we could go to the voters for a millage, which would take us, which would actually free up other county dollars for other purposes.
Wonderful.
And allow us, now, whether that's politically feasible or not, that's a whole other thing, but that's one of those tools that are out there that we should be thinking about.
Well, great, and what's at the heart of my point is we should have some hours dedicated to what are the deficiencies, how are we gonna fund them, what are the tools at our disposal, like there's a new one we just learned right there.
So Susan, of the $91,000 that we have sitting there, how much of that is ARPA funds, any of it?
No, because there's the Fund 487, that's why I put that fund out.
So the ARPA funds that haven't been spent are still sitting there as well?
They're being on the county's balance sheet.
Which are already,
Accounted
no,
No,
they're in the
airport.
Fund 481 Airport Capital Improvement Fund.
Well,
But that,
If we come in under budget on some of those things.
Right.
but
But-
you had to specifically ask for what you wanted that money for. And if you don't spend it on those things, then technically you're supposed to return it. The agreement that every person, entity signed. You could come to the board, yep, you can come to the board and do an adjustment, but I'm just saying, you gotta make sure that you do that, you can't
Well,
just.
it's the start of a path, so
Yeah.
that's the reason
Yeah.
I posed the question.
That's why I think the budget's so important.
And I think there was a timeline on when the money had to be spent. So you could ask for more time.
Or just spend it.
Pretty sure that I wouldn't say no.
If you get an okay to
Just do what it's intended to do.
Yes.
Well, on things it's intended to be
Yeah.
on.
And you know, there was leeway there, the way I worded it for you guys, like, you know, it was like terminal improvement. Like we didn't say this, and this, it was just terminal improvement. If you guys remember when we sat down and we went through all that, and we weren't like so wordy with it or narrowed down, like, let's say $100,000 for, so that gave you leeway to do carpet or paint or, you know, whatever needed, like the security doors or, you know, so I mean, as long as it's for terminal and expanding or whatever, you know, parking lot would be another thing that would be part of the terminal.
My sense is our wish list is greater than we have budgeted funds for, so it becomes a matter of prioritizing an
Right.
order of importance.
Right.
And
Well, and I would think that maybe that's what part of the capital improvement,
well, and it
Committee
kind of
would be,
goes to
right?
our meeting that we
Mhm.
just scheduled on the 29th.
Right.
I think that would be a perfect opportunity to have an agenda and a plan out a week prior to the meeting. And particularly if it's more than just administering ARPA funds that are already here. Because that's real simple. That's, you got money, it's for this use, we're gonna spend it, that meeting's done. This right here, to me, is almost budgeting. It's prioritizing what comes first, what delivers the greatest benefit.
what do we even need?
Yes.
In a vision forward, not just what we need right now, but we need a longer, runway. We need more access in our terminal. I mean, needs, wants, and have.
Yeah, I think all those things have to be done first, and then the budget reflects the priorities in the order in which we wanna do them.
Well, thus the need to get the 10,000, so we get the extra money to invest.
Make that very clear, and I pulled them along off the side.
All right, well, I didn't cut anybody off. We were kind of off of the agenda here, but I wanted
We're in the middle of my
to give
report.
everyone, that's what I'm trying to, I'm circling back to you here, so.
This is actually a great conversation.
It is.
And I encourage the board to continue. If that doesn't swing out, this is something we block.
So is there anything to continue with yours now?
So that slide spawned a lot of that. Just looking at Cape Air numbers, again, I mentioned March numbers, and you can kind of see our top 5 Marches. Cape Air has 3 of the top 5, and Public Charters has the remaining 2. And as we're looking forward on how Cape Air is doing, April, I'm projecting we're gonna be about flat with the previous year. But May's numbers are running ahead of last year and June as well. So I think both of those months, we should see some growth. And then the last thing I've got, just a quick little marketing update. So last week I met with Right Side Design, and based on last week's meeting, Brandon's trying to come up with a plan for how to market through the summer as we would head into an October 1st switch in carrier.
Is that when it switches, October 1st?
That Cape Air's contract ends the end of September, so
Okay.
October 1st, barring, them not being able to start on that day, in which case then Cape Air would have to continue until they can.
Okay.
Obviously, there's still DOT selection that has to happen as part of this too. But we're essentially talking, Brandon and I, we're talking through this, and we tend not to do a lot of marketing during the summer because generally our flights are at capacity, so we're not trying to fill them. Our marketing is more shoulder season-based marketing, which an October 1st start is kind of that shoulder season. So Brandon's gonna come back with more solid on this, but essentially what we talked to is basically soonish, probably when, DOT announces the selection officially or around that time frame, we would start rebranding our website of Cape Air, and make it more generic. So we don't want to pre-announce something that's gonna happen still months out, with a new carrier. But since it's initially gonna be the same hub, same connecting partners, United American, we can genericize our website, and then probably 30, maybe as early as 60 days before the cutover, we would start rebranding and bringing boutique into the mix as to what our website has. So there's a couple website updates throughout the summer, and then really more targeting marketing towards the end of our fiscal year in preparation of making sure that boutique has a good launch. So those are just part of the conversation we had, and there will be more coming on there. That's all that I have, although I do want to just pop up something here. I had this in my queue for last Monday, but it is a letter we received from the city, basically, encouraging us to, in our selection process. And I completely escaped my mind as we went through this, on last Monday, so. It's fairly generic, but, interesting that we look to.
Once we get to get that confirmed, it'd be nice to go to the city council meeting.
We're well
How it's
there,
gonna be, and
What?
we're well there. The city, we could dive into,
I don't think so.
no.
I think that would be a fun city meeting to go to.
I've mentioned to George that he ought to, get on the agenda and just give him a quick update, and just to let him know, hey, I'm here, I'm representing you, and
Yep. Mhm.
arm him with a little bit of something and go forward.
I think he would enjoy that, actually. All right. Anything else, Barry?
That's all I have.
Okay. And that brings us now to the, old business, unfinished business. Anything you want to bring up there?
I do have quotes, but,
Yeah, we need to
we were
talk.
gonna meet and we
We haven't.
have not
Had
had
a chance to, yeah.
Just got back.
Right. Okay, so under new business, we, kind of brought up a good bit of new business today. Anything else, new business anyone wants to bring up?
Well, just to give you an idea, as I recall, the boutique said they were in communication with Detroit. And I brought up the question about, since they've been in communication with Detroit, about having that inter-airline agreement with Delta. So I did get this from Amber Hunt. It basically says that Delta has exclusive agreement to use the Terminal C, Concourse C at McNamara.
Mhm.
So, and right now, United and American fly into the Evans Terminal, which is the old one.
Okay.
And they have a bus that goes every 10 to 15 minutes apart. So the only way we're gonna be able to get into is if they can get an interline agreement with Delta
Mhm.
to try to access Terminal C, from what I gather.
Okay.
So hopefully they have some success with that.
For what it's worth, I think it would be great if they had an interline agreement and got to Terminal C, and you could check your bags here, and they would end up in Atlanta with Delta. Wonderful. But I don't think that was at the heart of why people chose boutique. I think they chose boutique as one, a stepping stone, and two, you can go down and watch a Tiger game, go to Detroit, unlock the Detroit market, and bring those people here. So which is all very good reasons. So I'm not really hung up on which terminal, is used, and it seems like it's a real uphill battle to get in the new terminal. But what I think would be excellent is if this board had a stated goal that on October 1st, there was boutique air service to both Detroit and Chicago, and that the board, Barry, and boutique all work together in support of each other to deliver Detroit service, which was the main thrust of choosing boutique, to our customer. And I think it would be a tremendous disservice if Detroit isn't delivered until 9, 10, 11 months, a year into the contract. So, I don't know how we want to formalize that, but, you know, I really think there should be an all-hands-on-deck effort, politically, administratively, this board open on day one service to Detroit. And I think that should dovetail into our marketing campaign, as we look at transitioning from this carrier to another.
Adam,
That's a good point.
I strongly disagree with you on that. We need to make sure that we give boutique as straightforward a path to being successful and getting started at all. For the last week, I'm dealing with many conversations of people who are and rumors and everything else who are trying to convince me that Boutique isn't even gonna ever provide service here because they're gonna be insolvent, the plane isn't gonna be available, they don't have enough planes.
Those are fair points.
So, and I'm saying that not to scare people, but I'm spending a lot of time researching a lot of things that I'm hearing, because I feel it's my duty to present to the board. If Boutique misrepresented anything they said, the board needs to know that. As I'm hearing all of this stuff, I'm researching them. I have not found any case where Boutique has misrepresented anything. Were they always the most forthcoming with information? No. I'll give you an example. The aircraft, the Piaggio, which they have won, and that came up in the questioning, so that question was asked by the board, and they acknowledged they own one. That aircraft currently can't be flown for commercial service. It's not registered on their FAA certificate.
That's the twin engine?
Yes. They've got 6 months to accomplish that, but they need to produce a training program, a maintenance program for that. So there are things they need to execute on to get started October 1st. Rumor that I heard this morning is they're already planning on not starting until December. Who knows where that came from? My conversation with them on Friday was, yes, they've got lots of work to do, but they believe it can be accomplished. So I'm saying that to provide the board a little bit of context to see where we are. And I do agree, we need to focus on making them successful. But I think the easiest path is not to have them divide resources and now suddenly have 2 hubs. And also, if you think about the schedule, they would be starting October 1st is 4 flights a day, which is what Cape Air flew last year in October, 4 flights a day. And Cape Air was basically at capacity to Chicago. So if we now divide that, and is 1 flight a day sufficient into Detroit, or do you want to do 2? Well, now suddenly you've got only half the capacity of Chicago that we filled last year. So there's lots of things in this conversation that we should have. So I'm not saying no, my job is to do what the board wants. I'm just bringing up information that would cause me concern to push on day one a aggressive, schedule. I personally do think, though, that the Delta interline is important in us doing service to Detroit. Without that, the data I presented to the board before about demand from Detroit versus demand from Chicago, it's 5-to-1 difference that Chicago has more demand. If all we're focusing on is just local demand in and of, I don't think that's going to be enough, personal opinion, but based somewhat on the data that I have access to make that successful. That Delta interline, I think, is what community, because of the historic nature of Northwest before Delta, that's what will make that successful. But it gets it all into this planning and, the board coming up with clear goals and directions and why they want certain things. That all needs to come into play. And then, you gotta deal with the details.
Yeah.
So sorry,
No, I'm glad you shared, because my comments were made completely absent of that knowledge.
Well, again, it's rumor and hearsay as opposed to what's factual. If we were sold a bill of goods, and we made a request to have an airline serve this community under the Essential Air Service, and we got misinformed from that airline.
We did not get misinformed.
Well, I'm just saying, if we did,
Correct.
again, as far as rumors and innuendo, for whatever reason, that's a whole nother program.
Correct.
But they told us that they were going to deliver us Detroit and Chicago both. I expect them to deliver Detroit and Chicago both. And it's not 10 months into the contract, it's not 20 months into the contract. They said they were going to, that's what Gen 2 was. Or
Honestly,
option two.
I heard him say
I-
possibly.
I did not hear that as a commitment.
Right.
I heard that as something they would work towards during the contract to get Detroit service.
Well, I think I heard that it wasn't nailed down, but
They were
they
processed.
would work toward it, hence Barry, my comment.
Yes, no, I understand.
Our staff and our elected officials should push toward that, and I had no idea that you had all of these other things on your plate with respect to the financial wherewithal of the company.
And again, those are, I've not found, again, I want to be clear, I've not found anything that justifies the things I'm being fed, but I feel I need to research, because if there was, you know,
Is it as simple as asking for their balance sheet? I mean, they went from several airports serving to 2 or 3, I think, if I understand correctly.
I mean, at this point, I'm looking in the public records and asking them questions. I have not drilled down, because, again, if I find something that seems to be a credible issue, then due diligence says I need to investigate, but I've not found anything. So I just want to say, other than there's a lot of hurdles that need to happen for them to get the aircraft we've chosen, our option, flying and in commercial service, because realistically, starting in October with 4 flights a day, they can't do that with just one aircraft. So they have to acquire more, whether that's through lease or through purchase or whatever those arrangements are. And when we asked that question, they said they have an opportunity to lease more.
Mhm.
But those things have to happen. They are unlikely to be doing anything too concrete until DOT awards, which could be 2 months from now. You can't make financial commitments based on something that may not be there. Obviously, you can be doing the prep work so that day after you can sign things. But, you know, so there are a lot of things that need to happen. Now, I will ask this. Today, what makes Cape Air successful is the fact that they have 4 aircraft to support Manistee. You know, 3 essentially based here, 1 based in Chicago. And in my conversation with Boutique in their existing cities, that's a similar model they run. They've got about 4 aircraft assigned to each. I don't think it's reasonable, whether it's reasonable or not. I think it is unlikely that they will have 4 Piaggios in place by October 1st. They have 1 now, and there's a lot of paperwork that is necessary. So I'm expecting that they're gonna come to us and say, we'll have 2 Piaggios that will be the assigned aircraft, and our spares will be Pilatuses.
That's the single engine?
That's the single engine.
And that's okay?
That, it,
Question mark.
from a legal perspective, it can fly the route. It is up to the board to say whether or not that's allowed or not. To occasionally, if need be, utilize an aircraft that they already have for that purpose. My personal opinion is, yes, that's fine. The regulatory standpoint of that is, we can't have service with a single engine or a single pilot for 60 consecutive days. But if it's occasional because of maintenance issues, that's not a problem. But for those that have been on the board for a while, when Cape Air had a dual fleet here with some Tecnams and some 402s, you end up with training issues, oh, this crew isn't trained in that aircraft.
Yep.
So it complicates things, but from a getting where we are today to getting started, I'm anticipating that that is something they're gonna come back with. But I don't know.
You know, we can react to it when it comes, or we can, state our position early in the game, and they can react to our position.
What happens if this all falls apart?
Right.
What's our backup? Contour?
Well, so the way the process works with the EAS is if a new carrier is unable to start, the existing carrier is forced to continue providing service until a replacement, or that carrier can start or a replacement is found. So
That's a financial burden to Cape Air.
they get compensated. They have the option, although rarely do airlines take advantage of it, but they can ask DOT for more money because they're being held in, for a longer period of time. And actually, I had my monthly meeting with Andrew Bonney this morning, and we both talked about that possibility, and, you know, I had thought about it, and he had thought about it as being something that
Yeah.
could happen.
Sure.
I don't want this conversation to be negative, because at this,
not.
We're
at
just
this
being
point,
planful.
we need to be positive about
Yeah.
our choice, and we need to do everything possible to make it happen. But there are risks. There would be a similar, although different set of risks with Contour. One thing that didn't come up, in our conversation is I had mentioned that one of the reference checks for Contour was negative. Well, one of the negative comments was, yeah, they don't pay their bills for 4 or 5 months. They're always late, which to me is an indication of financial challenges with cash flow. So,
Which he said, and also now he's
Addressed with this
25%
cash
of his, yeah.
projection.
It's like, interesting.
so, again, we need to be positive, but also smart.
You know, Barry, I'm gonna come back to the comment I made here a minute ago. And that is, we can either react to the pitch Boutique throws us, or we can throw Boutique the pitches. And now, I'll give an example of that. I've learned some information from you that has caused me to reevaluate my statement about delivering service on, the 1st of October to Detroit. And I think your, information is valuable and it's warranted for a delay. But what I wouldn't do is say, okay, thanks. I would say, you know what, let's set a timeline. And so if you're starting service October 1st, November, December, January, February, March, March 1st, let's have service to Detroit, and you get 6 months to ramp up. And the airline is really clear on what we want. And we should give them expectations to meet, in my opinion. When I walked out of the meeting, went downtown, talked to people, oh, we don't have a jet. I don't like flying on twin-engine planes. I don't like flying on small planes from a customer perspective. So, from one board member's chair, I don't like the idea of single-engine aircraft. I don't like the idea of single-engine aircraft going over the lake. I like the idea of saying, figure out a twin-engine aircraft solution, not a single-engine aircraft solution, even if it's legal. And I would like, one chair, I would like to broadcast that to them as soon as possible, if it's the pleasure of the others around the table, so that they can work to that standard as early as possible and not waste days on the calendar and, oh, well, I wish we would have known this sooner.
So I have a question and comment. So I do agree with what you're saying, because I do get a lot of clients that prefer to fly out of Manistee, but don't like small planes, even the one we have now.
Some with life
But
insurance.
some will do it just for the convenience So having said that, you mentioned there was a study that the major airport is Chicago. I have to kind of disagree. Are you saying that study is done because people choose that only because that's the only place we go?
No, this is.
Because I have some people that'll call me and they're like, I do not want Chicago. I'll do Dallas, I'll even go to Atlanta, I'll do Detroit. I do not want.
I'm talking
So
non-connecting, just people flying between here and either of those, so nothing, no
Oh,
one
not
connecting.
connecting.
Right.
Well, yeah,
From a
that would make
connecting
sense for
standard,
not
that's-
connecting, but yeah,
That's a difference.
yeah.
And right now, 50% of our traffic is connecting and 50% is non-connecting. And when Adam started this conversation, he was saying, even if we don't have the Delta interline, we need to make Detroit work, and therefore you're only going after the non-connecting piece of Detroit. So,
I also made a lot
But
of
would
my
we have more
decisions.
people going that way if it was available? That's the
Right.
other thing. We don't have it available, so we don't really know the data
Right.
fully on it.
but we need to make it
But
available,
I see
we
what
need
you're
a Delta
saying.
interline. We probably need to be in the terminal that's gonna be hard to get into without Delta's cooperation.
Correct.
So there are pieces for that, but again,
Yeah.
it gets into what Adam is saying, is that we should be setting what we want as our end results, putting together what we hope is our timeline, and then saying, boutique, here's your marching orders.
Yeah.
And they said a certain plane, and, you know, that plane was nice. And they talked about the mechanics of it and all this different stuff. Interior of it looks beautiful, but if you're gonna give us something different, not happy with that.
I wanna
agree
make
with
sure the people that voted for them are getting what they voted
Yeah.
for, and not, anything lesser.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was a special type of twin impeller plane.
Yep.
That is a lot more advanced than what you're talking about, bringing in a single, you know, it's like, nope, not acceptable.
Although, I will say
For
that
emergency,
from a customer interior perspective, they're both equivalent. I mean, it is a significant step up from the Tecnam, for both. But, yes, no, I understand.
I don't know if you've heard clear direction from the board of what our expectation is to deliver boutique in terms of a start date for Detroit and in terms of whether single-engine aircraft is acceptable or not. And I think the board needs to provide you some direction on what they would like today before we walk out, because I don't want to wait a month for you to learn that direction from the board.
And with only 5 months left to start boutique
Yeah,
and
right.
afford to
So,
being months as well.
colleagues, what say you?
I think we all said it, you know, it's like, we want the PIs or whatever it is. You know, that's our primary interest. We also want them to work on getting to Detroit. We understand it might not be October 1, but it will be soon after that.
I think we should give a date, because if, without a clear date, Karen, then they're setting the date. Tomorrow never comes, and the target moves. And I would really like to hear whether single-engine aircraft is acceptable or not. That's binary, yes or no, and a date on the calendar. And that way, there's no room for anybody to have heard different things.
I think there's, then a third is what features need to be available in Detroit that to be worthwhile.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah,
Right.
there's three.
so,
Right.
let's start with the first one, is single engine an option or not? And I'm hearing no.
I just want to be
No.
crystal
And,
clear.
I would say no.
and is
So
that,
what happens if that plane isn't, they don't have a plane that day available?
Yeah,
Say it's down or whatever,
Is it better to
And-
cancel?
you'll have to
Or is
cancel
it
all
better
flights for that
to
day then, that's what he's
Twice a
asking.
month, fly a single engine plane?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the single engine plane, so I'll go on record as saying that, because I understand what certification is all about. There's emergencies, there are equipment
I wouldn't use the
problems.
word emergency.
Well,
It's
yeah,
just-
but,
It's just, if no other plane is available,
Mhm.
is that better to cancel or better to?
Here's what my position is. We're gonna go to a contingency pool for alternative aircraft. There's a problem with your primary aircraft, you're gonna go to a pool for a secondary aircraft. And my right?
And are we
Not
talking
discussing
about,
it.
and are we talking about over the water, or are we talking about to Detroit?
You know,
That's two
I don't know if,
two different
I don't know
discussions.
if Detroit's ever gonna come. We'll see.
Well, but we just said we need to put a date on starting
Great.
Detroit.
I would say, personally, from my chair, have the contingency pool be twin-engine aircraft. We can go around the horn here and feel, what everybody else wants, but my position is, we're going over the lake. People like, larger aircraft, twin-engine aircraft. I've said my piece. Let's go around the horn and hear whether the contingency aircraft is single-engine or twin. And I'm okay canceling a flight, because I think we need to put that pressure on the company to deliver twin-engine aircraft.
And that's where I would start. I would start with the conversation, of course, this will come to you, to be telling them, you know, my board is, you know, adamant about bringing Piaggio. You know, we want that as our service. Now, you mentioned a single, but they're not really interested in having those. Put the pressure on them and saying that we need to meet that. Now, it's not an all or nothing. You're asking them to bring it up to what you're saying you want, is this.
Let's start out at all or nothing, because if you give them an out, everybody takes their out.
I wouldn't say or. I'd just say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want, and ask them the expectation. This is our expectation. We want this plane, and we want this service.
I'll phrase it in light of our current service. Cape Air has basically said and demonstrated that it takes 4 planes to operate a single route by itself, where you can't share planes with other cities going into the same hub. It takes 4 planes to operate that at a level of reliability that we've now experienced the last number of months. Basically, you know, no mechanical cancellations, although in March we did have 1 cycle because 2 planes got taken out over a weekend with ice flying off the props and cracking windows. So even with 4,
I was on one of those flights.
they found out that there are circumstances where that can not be enough.
Yeah.
So if we're expecting the same level of service, I'm expecting Boutique to have 4 aircraft available for our route. Do all 4 of those need to be twin engine? Or is it 3 of 4 sufficient? And, you know, yes, that means the really weird case where you really dig deep that low, it's a single engine? Or are we saying that they need 4?
I think our customers should come to expect twin-engine aircraft out of Manistee. That's my soul. It's legally, technically able to fly on one, but we're trying to create a brand, an image, a reputation. I don't want somebody saying, well, what's the luck of the draw here today? Did I get the short straw on a single-engine plane?
I also heard some concerns about a single engine flying over the lake. Heard that in the presentation too,
Right.
so.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why I said, that's why I was bringing it up, are we talking about Chicago or Detroit?
Right.
Well,
I have no,
for Chicago, right, because we're talking about starting service,
Yeah.
and we can all probably agree that October 1, Detroit's not yet in the picture. So Chicago is practically what we're talking
Let's say 3 out of 4. I mean, you got 1 just for if you really need it, but we are not.
yeah, but if we're gonna be using 4 every day,
No, we
No,
would be
we got a pool.
2 each day.
2 each day,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know what the fear is about asking our service provider to raise to our standard. Is there a fear of this board to ask somebody for all twin-engine aircraft?
Well, I think
What is the fear?
I think you're confusing fear with practicality.
Okay, what is impractical about asking for a fleet of twin-engine planes
Well,
like, Cape Air?
That's what we want.
That's
That's what
where
we
we
want.
are right now, we're asking them for that.
Yeah.
And so I think we've pretty well hammered that point
Great.
down.
So the request is for the whole pool, twin-engine, is that our
For
consent?
going across the lake, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can we, without?
But, I mean, we still have, that's twin engine flying across the lake if there's not a maintenance issue somewhere along the way. Now, where does that leave? And I'm just keeping the conversation going here with the single-engine plane, which I think I'm probably in the minority, and that's okay. I don't mind being in the minority of not being afraid of the single-engine plane. But I don't want to tie everyone's hands too tightly this early on.
In the letter Barry wrote to the FAA, proposal of boutique option 2 with twin-engine aircraft for 2 years. It's in parentheses,
What we asked
option 2 with twin-engine aircraft for a 2-year term.
I don't know why we're having the conversation about single or twin. It's there.
For me, if we're only going to Chicago, I don't know what in the hell we didn't get Contour for, literally. If we're only going, the difference is the other market, twin-engine aircraft with the Piaggio P-180. That aircraft in Detroit was a sales point for boutique. If they can't live up to that, we made a massive mistake.
I agree.
I think, and again, we're very clear about that's what we expect. That's, I mean, I said it directly to him. These are the 2 reasons that, you know,
Mhm.
weighed heavily, plus also some personality differences, but, you know, I'm right there. I think we did.
So I mean, I'm going to agree with Adam.
Mhm.
We should be reaching out and saying, we're expecting 4 Piaggios October 1st. And that's not what they're planning, then they can come back and explain why their plan is different than our expectations based on what we inferred and heard from their presentation.
Mhm.
And
It wasn't
then-
inferred, by the way, like, it was very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason they did the Piaggio, he said, oh, pilot's not an issue because we can set the pilots in these and they're getting turbine experience. Emphasize that point.
Mhm.
But there are also other conversations that I've had with them where they're looking, because they have all of these lattices and not places to fly, they are essentially a charter company. And they're looking at a route in the Midwest as a place to put those aircraft so that they can do charters when they're not busy. So
Yeah. On
putting the
other
dots
side-
together, it's
other
like,
side-
well, then these can be the spares, and then they'll do charter work, and they'll bring us in money, but I'm, you know, hearing clearly that's not your expectations, and I can communicate that, that's not a
We do
problem.
not want a single over the lake. We do not want that.
And I thought we had a waive a right, because now I think if I'm reading my crystal ball right, I think people are saying, no singles over the lake, but singles are okay going to Detroit. And my question is, I thought we have to waive, an exception in our federal code, to be flying singles on regularly scheduled air service.
Correct.
Okay, great. And so, I didn't think this board wanted to waive and make that exception for single aircraft, as a single-engine aircraft.
I think they put it backwards.
Right.
Correct.
And,
Yeah, we don't
and
wanna
so
do
by
that.
extension, I would say, for the board's consideration, it's twin-engine aircraft regardless of where you're going. If you leave this airport, you're flying twin-engine aircraft to Detroit, Chicago, or anywhere.
The question is, are there exceptions, or is that
No,
a hard?
not in my book, maybe in everybody else's
So,
book.
let me give an example of that is, currently, Cape Air will occasionally fly without a first officer, and they'll fly 1 pilot. We require 2 pilot service, but we allow it on an exceptional basis. So, for example, if, you know, they're gonna bump a passenger because of weight and balance, is it better to bump the first officer instead of a passenger? So we've allowed that for Cape Air. You can, with boutique, you've got both, potentially, both the, 2 pilots and also then the twin engine, because they potentially can be substituting in occasionally both of those. So, it's a detail, but at this point, I think going to them and saying, our expectation is day one, you're gonna have your main aircraft and your spares be what you showed us, and that's our expectation. And if that's not their expectation, they can explain, and then
Yes.
you can react to that.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
For Detroit, I think we just need a date, and then what we expect to happen on that date.
Right.
And I mean, I would say, well, in their proposal, when they mentioned other cities, and I didn't catch this until I was rereading things after the meeting, but their proposal only talks about doing substitute city service in the non-winter months. There would be no Detroit service January, February, but it would only be shoulder and summer.
That's fine.
Because there's a little bit there. So given an October start date, I would say a reasonable Detroit start date would be
March 1.
essentially March 1 or April 1.
Perfect.
So that by
I
the
think
time next.
April 1, that gives them 6 months
Yeah, that's
to
fine.
ramp
Exactly
up
what I was
and whatever.
Right.
That's fine.
Fine.
March
And
is
then,
pretty-
and then, is it just sufficient to get to Detroit regardless of where down there they're parking? Or does it need in Delta Interline and?
I'd rather get there than not be there at all. I think my perfect world could be a Delta Interline, but I'd rather have the option to get down to Detroit or have Detroit folks come up here.
Right. Will Delta Interline with, I had in my mind that they were pretty well united
Delta-
with SkyWest. and
Delta
that-
generally does not interline.
Right. So
So,
I'm trying to figure
doesn't
out,
mean
Sky West with Contour.
It doesn't mean they don't. I mean, they interline with Cape Air, so, but they are not known as being friendly with these smaller airlines, because they're the first airline that have eliminated 50-seat regional jets. That, their model is not to accommodate,
Yeah.
their model is for Delta. So, it will be a heavy lift for them to get,
so get your bag, get on the bus, and go over to the other terminal.
and buy 2 tickets.
Right.
And buy
And if there's any issue, good luck, because you're not gonna be able to get your ticket changed, and you're not gonna be able to be reaccommodated. It will be a nightmare for anyone. It will prevent 80% of the people from ever using Delta, because the hurdles are just way too many. Now, it's possible.
Well, then, should we, I'm largely in Alyssa's camp, and it sounds as though the hill is pretty steep to climb to get an interline, but should we try? I mean, the president of Boutique said, well, you know, you gotta get your, senator to lobby. You gotta get, and I think our senator's on the transportation committee, right? So, should we make a concerted effort to go to Boutique and say, what's your plan, what do you need, how can we help you, and really try to get the interline?
It will make the Detroit service much more viable and successful if that Delta interline is there, so.
Why don't we give it a full court press and marshal our resources? And, I mean, that's the optimal, right? That's really what we're trying to provide to our customer. And I don't know why we wouldn't endeavor to do that as fiercely as possible.
Okay, I think.
I mean, that's my question for the group, that's just,
Tell Boutique, sure, and I'll also point them to the recording of this meeting if they want
Well,
any more details.
I'll flip, and I'll restate it again. If we don't have that plane and the service to Detroit, we made a major mistake. We should have went with Contour, period. End of story. 37,000 enplanements as opposed to
37,000
seats.
available seats
Seats,
versus 24,000.
yeah.
and I would further say it's twin-engine aircraft at Detroit.
Oh, yeah, no, that.
Not single, yeah, it's just, if
Yep.
it takes off, it's twin coming out of here.
Yeah, because, no, we couldn't allow that on a regular.
Right, right. Ultimately.
I think that's the expectation we set.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, it was worth the time.
Yep.
thank you.
All right, so, I think that qualifies as comments by authority members. Do we have any more public comment coming online here? Anything else, anybody? Okay, I'll move for an adjournment. Great.
Thanks, lovely.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, everybody.
Can I have that?
See everybody.